This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Do you ever have a story that you just can't get out of your head?
One that you play the details of over and over with your friends?
Well, you've come to the right place. I'm Claire.
And I'm Susan.
And this is Justice Pending,
a weekly true crime podcast where we discuss tantalizing crimes with more questions than answers.
It's a story that sounds impossible. A young medical student walks into a bar on a busy Friday night and never walks out.
There is surveillance footage of him going in, clear as day, but none of him leaving.
It's like he vanished into thin air.
And 19 years later, there are still no answers, no trace, and no closure.
Welcome back to Justice Pending. I'm Claire.
And I'm Susan.
Today, we are discussing the baffling disappearance of Brian Shaffer.
Brian Randall Shaffer was born February 25th, 1979 in Pickerington, Ohio, which is a quiet suburb outside Columbus. From everything people say, he was smart, kind, and very grounded.
Brian graduated high school in 1997, went to Ohio State University, and later enrolled in the College of Medicine in 2004. But medicine wasn't his only dream.
That's right. He had his other side, which was his love of music. Friends say he idolized Jimmy Buffett and Pearl Jam, and he actually had the Pearl Jam stickman tattooed on his arm. He used to say that someday he wanted to start a band and live on an island.
I love somebody with a dream, right, Susan?
That's
It's always
warm.
nice. So even as he was studying to become a doctor, he had that kind of easygoing, creative spirit. People described him as funny, charismatic, sometimes stubborn, but never reckless.
And in 2006, Brian was a second-year med student. He had a girlfriend, Alex Wagoner, and they were both in med school together. And friends said he was planning to propose to her during a spring break trip to Miami.
Yeah, it was supposedly pretty serious, but before that could happen, tragedy struck. Brian's mom, Renee, had been battling bone cancer, and she died just a few weeks before he disappeared in 2006.
Yes, that loss hit him hard as it would anybody.
Yeah.
And friends said he was grieving, but still functioning. So he wasn't showing signs of depression outside of the normal grieving and grief period. But he did seem focused on finishing his exams before taking time to relax.
Spring break was supposed to be a reset. Instead, it became the beginning of a mystery that's still unsolved.
Right. So let's get into it. Let's set the scene. It's Friday night, March 31st, 2006. This is the start of spring break at Ohio State. Brian has just had dinner with his dad, Randy, at a local steakhouse. And his dad later on said that his son seemed tired from studying, but otherwise fine.
Yeah, I mean, who isn't tired on a Friday night when you're cramming for exams? It's totally understandable.
Totally agree.
So after dinner, Brian calls his younger brother, Derek, and asks if he wants to meet up. Derek says he can't make it, but he didn't realize that would be the last time he ever heard from his brother.
Wow, 2020 is terrible sometimes,
Yeah.
right? So later that night, Brian wants to keep the party going, I guess, and meets up with his friend and former roommate, Clint Florence. That was around 9:30, 10 p.m. And they went to the Ugly Tuna Saloona, which is a popular bar in the University District.
Very memorable name right there. I love Ugly Tuna Saloona. So before the night really gets going, Brian calls his girlfriend Alexis. She's visiting her parents in Toledo that weekend. They chat briefly. She remembers that he tells her that he loves her and he's looking forward to their trip. It's just a normal, affectionate, like check-in call.
Yeah, and from there, the night seems to unfold like any other, I guess, university student at the start of spring break. There are shots, beers, bar hopping,
Yep.
from one to another. And at one point, they meet up with Clint's friend, Meredith Reed, where she drives them back to the start of it all, the Ugly Tuna Saloona, around 1:15 a.m. And that's when security footage picks up Brian for the last time.
I love security footage. I love knowing where someone is with a timestamp.
Yeah.
Just that being able to pinpoint them, I feel like is so helpful in stories like this. You always wish that it gave like a bigger picture that you got to see when they walked out of the frame, where they went. But what we can see on this security footage is Brian entering the Ugly Tuna Saloona, and the cameras actually show Brian, his friend Clint, and Meredith riding the escalator up to the bar's second floor entrance. Later, Brian is seen chatting outside with two women near closing time. And around 1:55 a.m., he turns and walks back toward the bar entrance.
And then, Claire, this is what's going to really frustrate you. Nothing. He is never seen again.
Yeah, so his friends tried calling, but his phone went straight to voicemail. When the bar closed at 2 a.m., they assumed he'd gone home.
And continuing that the next morning, still no one could reach him. Not Clint, not Alexis, not his dad. And when Brian didn't show up for their Monday flight to Miami, the one where he was going to propose to his girlfriend, that's when everyone knew something was wrong.
Yeah, he was officially reported missing that day, April 3rd, 2006. So they go out Friday night, and this just seems like the start of a fun weekend. And everyone expects, no matter what happened, he's going to show up for that flight. And gosh, can you just imagine
No.
being that girlfriend and you're waiting at the airport and he just never comes?
No, I don't.
Awful.
I mean, I don't know if at that point she's worried or pissed off. It's like, God, so many emotions could be happening.
Oh,
But
yeah.
he is reported missing. And right from the get go, the search begins, which we always like to see. So, in the first few days, police searched everywhere: dumpsters, alleyways, construction sites, the nearby river. There's 50 officers working this case looking for him.
Yeah, it's high visibility. He was someone who typically kept in touch with his family and friends. So the idea that he would be unreachable was just a major red flag. His car was still parked at his apartment. His bed was actually made.
That's impressive.
So, yeah, I know, right? For anyone, much less a med student in the middle of finals. But that makes you think that Brian never came back from the bar that night. If he had come back after 2 a.m., what are the odds that he would have made the bed again in the morning? To me, it feels like something that you do before you go out that night, and that I don't think we really have any accountability for him after 1:55 a.m. when it looks like he's going back into the bar, which would have been closing in 5 minutes. So
Mhm.
it's just really, yeah, it's really
Yeah.
interesting to think. Yeah,
And the car parked at his apartment does not indicate he came home. It just
right.
means he knew he was going out drinking and didn't drive responsibly, didn't drive. So that,
Yes,
yeah.
I would agree with that. And, the authorities said there's no sign that, there was any kind of foul play at that apartment. His medical books were neatly stacked. It just seemed like a normal, very tidy apartment.
Yeah, and we do have this surveillance footage from the Ugly Tuna. And the detectives could clearly see Brian going into the bar, but like I said, there was no footage of him leaving, which is so odd.
Yeah, so here's where things get really strange. The bar had two cameras, one that panned automatically and another that was manually operated. Between them, they covered almost every angle of the exit.
Yeah, but you said almost.
That's right, almost.
There was one other way out, and that was a back door leading to a construction site. It would have been dark, dangerous, and full of debris. So, if Brian had left that way, he easily could have fallen or at least been injured.
And so, of course, authorities wanted to explore this possible alternate exit. and they had the canine unit there. But cadaver dogs didn't pick up his scent in that area or anywhere near the bar.
Yeah, and they had checked that construction site. They had also checked hospitals, shelters, riverbed. I mean, nothing. They found no trace of him.
Yeah, to me, it makes me think of so many people that have gone missing in Austin, off of 6th Street, which is really close to Town Lake in Austin, and a lot of times they end up finding their bodies in the water, and I made me think, gosh, I wonder with this river being kind of close by, if potentially he wandered off into the water. That's
Mhm.
just one of those things where my mind goes because when you mix lots of alcohol, people on foot, darkness, and bodies of water, a lot of times it doesn't end well.
That's right.
So the closest people to Brian were, of course, questions. They were questioned, they were interviewed by authorities to see if they knew anything or had any reason to harm Brian. His friends, even the band that played that night at the bar, people who worked there, women that he had spoken to, at the bar, everyone cooperated and everyone passed lie detector tests.
Except for one person, and that person is Clint Florence, who he had gone out with, his former roommate and his
Yep.
friend.
So Clint refused to take a polygraph and later stopped talking to police altogether. I would say if I was ever asked to take a polygraph, I would never take one because I know how unreliable they are. So I do have some sympathy for Clint here. I of course want all the information I can get on any type of open investigation, but I do understand why someone would be hesitant to take a polygraph even if they have nothing to hide and no involvement in a disappearance.
Right. And in that same vein, we should note that he's never been named a suspect at all. Brian's brother has publicly stated that he's always felt something off about him, but I'm not sure why he has that feeling.
Right. I mean, there's just so many possibilities, right? If you go out with a friend and they're never seen alive again, that would affect you. Like
Yeah.
that would definitely make you a different person, I would think. So who knows what Derek might be picking up on um with Clint, but he did get an attorney and this attorney wrote a letter saying that if Brian was alive, then he, not Clint, was the one causing his family pain. Because there's really no evidence that Brian died. There's no body, there's no blood, no sign of injury. So it's just really like he walked out of the ugly tuna saloona
Mhm.
and disappeared off the face of the earth. It's so bizarre.
It is. And by the way, that's also a very bizarre thing to write like a public letter. I just found
Yeah,
that to be strange.
I agree. Yeah, the attorney doing that,
Yeah.
it almost sounds like
Defensive. I don't mean, I guess it's the point. He's a defense attorney.
right, right, but
Yeah.
almost kind of like
Like he knows something.
suggesting that he's
Yeah.
still alive.
Yeah.
Like,
Like he knows something and
right,
it's not his place
right.
to say it or something like that. Yeah. Yeah.
So
Strange.
let's talk about some other leads and theories. After Brian disappeared, there were months where no new information came to light. His girlfriend, Alexis, called his phone every night and it always went to voicemail until one night in September.
I know. And this is one of the creepiest details. The phone actually rang 3 times before going to voicemail.
So when the phone company checked, because of course the girlfriend was like, oh my gosh, what's happening?
Right.
And brought this to the attention of authorities, they said that it was probably a glitch.
Mm.
But they could tell that the signal had pinged from a tower in a town that was about 14 miles away from
And
where Brian disappeared from.
right. Of course, that single ring gave everyone hope. And for a moment, it felt like maybe he was still out there.
Yes, but that hope faded fast. There were no purchases, no credit card activity, no bank withdrawals, nothing. I mean, if his phone was turned on, you would think him or someone else would be using his credit cards. Like, how are you getting around in the world if you're Brian Shaffer and you've decided to start your life over, you would think you would need some cash to do that. And there was no withdrawal, there was no um nothing. I mean, just these unexplained 3 rings.
I mean, I'm sure it was a glitch, but that's just cruel to
It
do.
is. Gosh, you just
Uh,
think about, yeah, stuff like that. It always, coincidences. It's hard to believe that anything's a coincidence whenever you are searching for answers in the disappearance of someone that you love. You're going to cling to anything that you can as a sign or a clue, but it doesn't really feel like there's anything here, unfortunately.
right. And in the same topic of, oh my gosh, how terrible of a coincidence,
Yeah.
years later, so 2 years later, in 2008, tragedy struck the family again when Brian's father, Randy, was killed in a freak accident. He was hit by a falling tree during a storm. I mean,
Yeah, it just seems like unbelievably terrible luck, to have, like, one of those 1 in a million type struck by lightning sort of situations,
yeah.
so that's awful, and, I mean, you talk about just Brian's family, I mean, it's just disappearing, right? So his mother died, very, shortly before he disappeared, and then his dad dies 2 years later, so all that's left is his brother Derek.
Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean, it's so sad,
it
but
really is,
not as
and
sad as what happened next.
I know, so unbelievably, Brian's father, Randy, has, online obituary in memory, and people can leave comments, right? And somebody wrote, "Dad, I love you. Love, Brian, U.S. Virgin Islands."
And police traced that to a public computer in Ohio and said it was a very cruel hoax. I mean, who
Yeah,
does that?
I know, it's really messed up, right? But it reminds me in some ways of, like, the Amy Bradley
Yes,
case.
it
Remember
does.
that one? Where she disappeared off a cruise ship and people have,
People
you
say they saw
know
her in the
yeah,
aisle.
said that they saw her all over, tropical locations, and yeah, but thankfully the police at least are able to get into that data and figure out where is this IP address coming from. The public computer in Ohio does make you think that it's not going to be Brian, because if he was still in Ohio, don't you think all the people that knew him someone would have seen him by now, right?
Yeah,
But it's just weird. Who would do that and why?
no, it's terrible.
Theories began to swirl. One popular one was the quote smiley face killer theory. Um, do you remember this one, Susan?
True.
This was, yeah, a group of serial killers who were believed to be targeting intoxicated college men across the Midwest. The timing is right for this, around 2006.
Yeah, it was a big internet theory at the time, but police never found any credible link or just didn't believe in it enough to pursue it. Very
Right. Again, it reminds me of, like, the Austin serial killer theory, which
right.
it's usually men. They're leaving 6th Street, a popular nightclub scene, and they're on foot and they end up uh, dead in the lake. And people say that it's a serial killer.
Yeah, for years,
Um,
I think people have been thinking it's a serial killer, and every time the authorities are sort of like, "No."
Right, right. So some people think that Brian staged his own disappearance. We've talked about that a little bit. Possibly he was overwhelmed by grief from his mother's death and pressure in medical school and just wanted to escape.
But so Sergeant John Hurst does actually think this is possible. He thinks it's possible Brian chose to walk away, and he's said that he doesn't think it was suicide or abduction. So
Yeah.
that's just interesting that that's where his brain is leading him.
Yeah. So if we follow this theory that he
Mhm.
chose to walk away, where did he go, Susan? Where did he go without his car his bank account, or anyone from his former life.
Yeah, I mean, his girlfriend, his friends, his family, he had no reason to vanish.
So as of today, Brian Shaffer has been missing for 19 years. He would be 46 years old as we sit here today in 2025.
Yes, and the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation released an age progressed photo showing what he might look like now. And there is still a $100,000 reward for information.
That is a very large reward considering Crime Stoppers awards for felonies start at $10,000. So kudos to the friends and family of Brian for getting that reward up to $100,000. And every few years, a possible sighting surfaces, right? There's some new theory or a new piece of information, probably because that reward keeps it more top of mind than it would be with just so many different, sadly missing persons cases that are unsolved. Actually, in 2020, a photo went viral of a homeless man in Tijuana who
Hmm.
looked strikingly similar to Brian. The FBI ran facial recognition and confirmed that it was not him.
Yeah, I think
This,
people want to see it, want
yes,
to see him out there.
people do want to see that. Again, it makes me think of the Amy Bradley case where
Yep.
they ran facial recognition software and they said it was possibly her. They
That's
couldn't
right.
rule it out.
That's right.
So I love that the FBI has access to this type of tool. I think it's one of those things that we used to see in the movies and people didn't, they were like, oh, if only we could do that. They can actually do that now.
Yep.
Um, but unfortunately, it hasn't led to answers in this case.
And his brother Derek, who appears to be the last man standing here,
Yeah.
has really said he doesn't believe Brian would have just taken off. He called him, he says he's grounded, goal oriented, deeply loyal. He doesn't think he would have done this to his family, his would be
Yeah.
fiance.
Right. And Derek has a quote that he gave to a magazine where he said, he was going to do great things as a doctor. He wasn't into drugs. I don't think he would just take off and never contact us again. I'm afraid something bad did happen and we may never find out.
And isn't that the hardest part? There's no body, there's no evidence, and so there's no closure. And we're left with just a family, a person in a
Yeah.
family, and by extension, his girlfriend, I suppose, that
Yeah.
has lived 2 decades, in the space between hope and heartbreak.
Yeah, cases like this really haunt people, not just because of the mystery, but because of the impossibility of it all. How can someone vanish from a place full of cameras and a crowd without a trace?
And why him? Why then?
Right.
A man who had so much to live for, he just wanted a little vacation after a few exhausting weeks and to propose to his girlfriend. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's a reminder that sometimes the scariest stories aren't about what we see, they're about what we can't see.
True. And, that some people out there believe Brian found a way to start over. Others believe he met with a tragedy and that maze of construction behind the bar. But truly, the truth may never be known.
If Brian is still out there or if someone knows what happened to him, we hope they come forward because his story and his family's pain deserves an ending.
But for now, it remains justice pending.
If you have any information on the disappearance of Brian Shaffer, contact Central Ohio Crime Stoppers at 614-461-8477.
And thanks for joining us on another episode of Justice Pending. We'll be back next week with an all-new case.
Justice Pending is recorded in Dallas, Texas for Rebel Studios. It's hosted by me, Claire Sanama, and Susan Passoni. Our theme music is Bending Truth, licensed at premiumbeat.com. We appreciate all listener feedback. Leave a review wherever you're listening right now, and we might read it on the air. Thanks for joining us.
This has been a Rogue Media Network production.